Chapter 19. On the third evening after she had sent him the letter, Pierre Laroche appeared jauntily at the tailor shop.
"This is no place to talk,"
he decided, eyeing the uncomfortable furnishings.
"There is a tavern a few doors down, where we can get more of the chocolate you do not seem to dislike."
This time Miriam did not hesitate. She needed both the chocolate and Pierre's goodwill. She was sure it must be improper for a girl to enter the murky little shop, but to her surprise, she found it scrubbed and respectable. Across the small table she endured the smug air of masculine triumph with which Pierre appraised her. She knew exactly what he was going to say, and he did not spare her.
"So, you changed your mind about seeing me?"
"I had good reason," she answered, assuming as business-like a manner she could manage.
"If I had known the letter was from you, I'd have come sooner," he went on. "When the boy brought it, there was no one about to read it for me, so I stuffed it into my pocket and forgot all about it till I found it there tonight."
Astonishment distracted her from her purpose. "You mean, you can't read?"
Pierre bristled. "What do you take me for? A monk who spends his life with his head in a book? I told you, when I was 10 years old, my grandfather took me out of school to go into the trade. I can't read well enough to tally up my year's accounts, never fear."
"Well, I am grateful to you for coming," Miriam hastened on, embarrassed at her rudeness. "I wrote to you because I didn't know where to turn. You see, Captain Johnson came back finally, just as I told you he would. But without even letting him explain, they took him off to prison, and Suzanne and the children with him."
Pierre raised an eyebrow. "What kind of reception did your English captain think to get in Montreal?"
"But he had a letter of credit for the governor, and a passport. He intended to take us away at once."
"How did he expect you to get back? Don't you know that the Indians on your side of the river are hungry for English scalps?"
"He had Indian guides hired to see us back."
Pierre shook his head. "Take my advice. Montreal may not just suit your fancy, but it's better than being roasted alive."
Miriam shuddered. It had not occurred to her that they might not be able to reach number 4.
"You didn't seem to find Montreal so distasteful last winter," he said. "The trouble is, a girl like you needs excitement. I wager those tailor's dummies haven't been lively enough company for you."
He'd succeeded at last in bringing a reluctant smile.
"That's better. What you need is to forget your troubles and step out a little. What do you say to a little party this evening? A few friends of mine."
"In this dress?"
Pierre stared at her, confused. "You mean, that is the only one you own? Parbleu, I'll buy you a dress." She stiffened instantly. "Good heavens, girl, what's a dress? 5 dresses, for that matter. I guarantee, if I ask them, I can get one of the shops to open just for you." Miriam tightened her lips stubbornly. "What a stuffy little Puritan you are, anyway," he flung at her. "Here I find you after all this time, living like a stray cat, and all you do is arch your back and glare at me." The picture of herself was too apt, and she had to laugh. Truce declared, she came seriously to the point. "There is something you can do," she said soberly, "if you really want to help me. No one will listen. Can you get me into the jail to visit my sister?" Pierre stared at her. Then suddenly he threw back his head and laughed so loudly that a passing Frenchman paused in the street and peered in through the doorway. "What a girl!" he exclaimed. "Offer her a dress, invite her to a party, and what does she want instead? To go to jail."
"I'm serious, Pierre. Can you do it, please?"
"Look here, little one," he said, taking a serious tone himself. "As far as getting your family out of that jail, I can do nothing at all. But if you really want to go in there and visit them, I think I can arrange that. Tomorrow morning."
Contrary to her expectations, he kept his word. Though it was almost midday and she had given up hope, he came for her and conducted her along the streets to the jail. There he spoke to the sentry, and passed something into the man's hand.
"And mind you," Pierre repeated to the sentry, "she comes back, in a quarter hour. I shall be waiting here to see that she does."
That mocking glance of his could be steely enough when he chose. With a backward glance of gratitude, Miriam stepped through the stone gateway. In the narrow passageway her senses shriveled. With every step away from the hot summer street, the chill damp increased, until she was shivering. As they entered the common jail, the stench struck her in the face like a smothering blanket. In the half-dark she could make out huddled forms, crowded close together like grotesque shadows. Their terrifying faces turned towards her, grayish-white with coal-black, greedy eyes. In a cell-like chamber, separated from the rest, Susanna and her husband and children sat on rough wooden benches. They were more fearful than pleased to see her. Are you sure you can get back out? Susanna kept insisting. Miriam reassured her, intensely grateful all at once for that confident figure waiting outside. I will keep on trying to see everyone I can think of, she told them. The city seems to be full of soldiers, and everyone is too busy to listen. I came back at the worst possible time, said James. I am sure they are preparing for a major battle. Also, the governor has been replaced. This new man, Monsieur de Vaudreuil, claims to know nothing whatever about the agreement. The letter of credit is absolutely worthless, so they say. Hard money they would listen to, I think. Miriam, I can pay the jailer to get me paper. I will write a letter to the governor at Albany. Take it with you, and if you could possibly find a chance to send it. While James scratched at his letter in the dim light, Miriam stared about the place. The children sucked hungrily on the lumps of maple sugar she had brought in her pocket. With growing horror, Miriam saw the little stream of water dripping down the moldy wall into a dirty pool on the floor, the mats of straw covered with filthy scraps of blanket, the chipped dishes, the pail greasy with traces of soup. Her muscles quivered as a shadow moved in the corner and disappeared. Yes, 'tis a rat, said Susanna calmly. But it will not come near while we are awake. James and I take turns watching at night. Captive does not know enough to be afraid, but Polly— Oh dear, if I had only let Polly stay with that woman, she would have a clean bed and— Miriam grasped her sister's hand tightly. Polly is better off with you, even here, and it won't be long. We will think of something. And you, Miriam? Asked Susanna, holding fast to Miriam's hand and looking earnestly into the girl's face. To think that we had to leave you alone. Can you manage by yourself in that room? Of course I can, Susanna. I have a dress for Madame to work on, and the tailor's so busy he's glad of my help. Truly, you don't need to worry about me. 'Tis you and the children. How can you bear this horrible place? Susanna's face, pale and frighteningly thin, was curiously serene. In the murky light of the cell her eyes were luminous. "'Tis all right, Miriam," she answered quietly. "If only the children do not get sick. For me, it does not matter. I can stand anything now, anything, so long as James is with me again." Miriam could barely keep from running as the guard led her back through the jail. When the heavy door swung open, she flung herself forward into the clean sunlight and stood gasping as though she had escaped some indescribable horror. Pierre was still there, though for the moment he did not notice her, being engaged in a lively game of dice with the sentry. He looked up, grinned, pocketed the dice, and joined her. "Was it worse, Ozyphus?" he inquired. "You look as though you'd seen a ghost." "They are ghosts, those people in there. Pierre, it is a dreadful place. Unclean. Horrible." Pierre shrugged. "They should be smart enough to stay out of it, then." "But do they really deserve to be there? Maybe there are others like Susanna and James, and little children. I can't bear to think of it." "You are a soft-hearted little thing, in spite of that temper," he commented. "Those people aren't worth your pity. Your sister, of course, that is different. Something should be done about her." She seized this opening to explain about the letter James had written. Pierre's face darkened. "See here, ma petite," he said finally. "I am not going to get mixed up in this business of English prisoners, and I haven't the influence you seem to think. In fact, I am pretty generally out of favor of this regiment, thanks to their fool regulations." When they reached the tailor shop, however, he reconsidered. "One thing I can do," he admitted. "I know a good Indian runner who can be persuaded to take your letter to Albany. He owes me his skin. He can be trusted to bring back the money, which is more than you could say for a lot of them. There now, that's more like it," he added, as Miriam's face went radiant. "Now, will you take the weight of the world off those pretty shoulders? I shall get a carriage and we will drive out along the river." And this time she went. With the letter on its way to Albany, Miriam's heart was somewhat lightened. She finished the dress for Madame Ducleste, and the tailor, flooded with orders from the French soldiers that swarmed the streets, gave her odd jobs that filled her hours. Except for the thought of Susanna, she was not unhappy. Often, remembering her sister, she was ashamed at how all her senses responded to the warm pulse of summertime. Perhaps it was the cups of chocolate and the odd dainties that were urged on her by Pierre. Once he even arrived with a whole roast chicken wrapped in a napkin. Perhaps his very coming had answered a deeper hunger, for in spite of herself, she found that she was constantly waiting for his unpredictable visits. His stride on the pavement outside her window, his mocking, boastful voice, made her breath come faster. He did not mention again meeting his friends. In fact, she could not help noticing that he was careful to avoid any place where they might be. They drove together along the river road in the dusk, or lingered at the table under the friendly eye of the tavern owner's wife. Miriam's role was very easy. She had only to listen. Pierre never tired of boasting of his exploits in the forest, of his beloved canoe, of the long journeys through winding river courses to the wealth of furs that waited in the unending country to the west. He loved to tell of his grandfather, 70 years old, but still the greatest courier of them all, who could paddle the most dangerous rapids, endure the longest portage, and outsing and outdrink every trader in the west. Listening, Miriam's imagination was stirred. Her pioneer blood beat faster at the thought of the wild, unexplored country. She would watch Pierre, totally unaware of her own shining eyes and parted lips, but sometimes he would fall silent, and then she would look away, unable to meet the half-taunting, half-caressing stare that rested on her as perceptibly as a touch. She was never really at ease with him. Always, behind his laughter, she glimpsed the lurking shadow of Makoa. "What a silly goose I am," she would scold herself afterwards, when Pierre had gone. "To let a little flattery go to my head like this." Then, in the silence of the room, she would get out Phineas Whitney's letter, unfold it carefully, and read the scholarly lines again. "Phineas Whitney is worth a dozen of him," she would remind herself. "And besides, Pierre may never come again." But even as she said it, something within her was listening and waiting, and the words on the sheet of paper were dim as an echo from a long, long distance.
A monk who spends his life with his head in a book? I told you, when I was 10 years old, my grandfather took me out of school to go into the trade. I can't read well enough to tally up my year's accounts, never fear.
"Well, I am grateful to you for coming," Miriam hastened on, embarrassed at her rudeness. "I wrote to you because I didn't know where to turn."
"If I had known the letter was from you, I'd have come sooner," he went on. "When the boy brought it, there was no one about to read it for me, so I stuffed it into my pocket and forgot all about it till I found it there tonight."
Astonishment distracted her from her purpose. "You mean you can't read?"
Pierre bristled. "What do you take me for?" he decided, eyeing the uncomfortable furnishings. "There is a tavern a few doors down, where we can get more of the chocolate you do not seem to dislike."
This time Miriam did not hesitate. She needed both the chocolate and Pierre's goodwill. She was sure it must be improper for a girl to enter the murky little shop, but to her surprise, she found it. Chapter 19. On the third evening after she had sent him the letter, Pierre Laroche appeared jauntily at the tailor shop.
"This is no place to talk,"
scrubbed and respectable. Across the small table she endured the smug air of masculine triumph with which Pierre appraised her. She knew exactly what he was going to say, and he did not spare her.
"So, you changed your mind about seeing me?"
"I had good reason," she answered, assuming as business-like a manner as she could manage.